6 in the evening, the 26th of July, 1952. Ras El Tin Palace, Alexandria. King Farooq walks down the marble steps in his white admiral's uniform, past the colonnades, past the officers who will not meet his eyes, toward the private harbour where the royal yacht Mahroussa is waiting with its engines running. A 21-gun salute fires across the Mediterranean. The Egyptian national anthem plays for the last time in the history of the Egyptian monarchy. Behind him, servants are loading crates into the hold. Crates labelled champagne and whiskey. They contain gold bars. In the car that brought him here at 80 miles per hour from Montaza Palace sat his second wife, Queen Nariman, 3 daughters from his first marriage, an English nanny, and a 6-month-old baby boy who is, at this moment, so technically the reigning king of Egypt. 150 years of dynastic rule, the wealthiest family in the Middle East, reduced to a motorcade and a gangplank. Within 2 years, Sotheby's will auction the contents of Farouk's 5 palaces, 8,500 gold coins, over 100 automobiles, all painted red, Fabergé eggs, weapons, stamps, and a single American coin that will eventually sell for $18.9 million. Within 7 decades, Farouk's grandson will move back to Cairo with his wife and 2 children. He will not reclaim a single palace, a single coin, a single acre. He will rent an apartment. The grandson of the man who owned 500 rooms in Abdeen Palace alone and 75,000 acres of Nile farmland will need to prove to a government clerk that his father, the former king, was Egyptian. This is the story of every member of Farouk's family after that yacht sailed. 4 children scattered across Switzerland, a king who remembers nothing of his 337-day reign, 3 daughters who worked as translators and hotel employees, and the grandson who chose to come back to the country that took everything. The Mahroussa crossed the Mediterranean toward Naples. It was the same vessel that had carried Farouk's grandfather, Khedive Ismail, into exile 73 years earlier, in 1879, a detail Farouk certainly knew. Before stepping aboard, he had signed the abdication document at Ras El Tin, demanding only 2 conditions: that it be written on official stationery because his friend Syria's president had been forced to write his resignation on a scrap of paper, and that he depart with full military honours. Both were granted. General Mohammed Naguib, the figurehead of the Free Officers movement that had seized power 3 days earlier, boarded the yacht just before it sailed. He told Farouk, "Sir, I am not responsible for this." Farouk's response, if he gave one, was not recorded. But earlier that day he reportedly told a courtier that soon there would be only 5 kings left: the King of England, the King of Spades, the King of Clubs, the King of Hearts, and the King of Diamonds. The coup had taken 72 hours. On the night of July 22nd, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser and a cadre of dissident army officers had seized military headquarters in Cairo. Infantry units arrested the royalist army chief of staff. Nasser and Abdel Hakim Amr drove through the capital in civilian clothes, personally detaining royalist commanders before they could reach their barracks. Anwar Sadat was at the cinema. By 6 in the morning on July 23rd, Free Officers Air Force units patrolled Cairo's skies. By 7 that evening, Sadat announced on the radio that the Revolutionary Command Council governed Egypt. The revolution was essentially bloodless. Farouk had refused to request British military intervention or allow loyal forces to fire on the revolutionaries. In the abdication document, he wrote, "The shedding of a single drop of Egyptian blood is more precious to me than all the thrones in the world." His son would not set foot in Egypt for 39 years. His grandson would not hold an Egyptian passport until he was 41. The yacht's first anchorage was off the Isle of Capri, where the family checked into the Aden Paradiso Hotel. Farouk eventually obtained Monegasque citizenship and settled in Monaco, but spent most of his remaining years in Rome, becoming a fixture of the Dolce Vita social scene. He rented 30-room hotel suites. He dropped more than $100,000 a week at Riviera casinos. He grew enormously obese, nearly 300 pounds, and was described by European tabloids as a stomach with a head. He was under constant surveillance by NASA's intelligence services. In exile, the scale of what he had left behind became legible only through its absence. Behind him, in Cairo alone, sat 1,000 bespoke suits in the wardrobes of Abdeen Palace. Over 100 luxury automobiles, all painted red. Farouk had made it illegal for anyone else in Egypt to own a red car. Sat in royal garages, his coin collection filled rooms. The Muhammad Ali dynasty, founded by an Albanian-born Ottoman commander who seized Egypt in 1805, had accumulated wealth across 150 years of unbroken rule. Farouk had inherited a fortune worth approximately $100 million in 1936 terms, roughly $2.3 billion in today's money. Plus 30,000 hectares of Nile Valley farmland, 5 palaces, 200 automobiles, and 2 yachts. And all of it now belonged to the Egyptian Republic. Queen Nariman returned to Egypt in 1953, having left Farouk in Italy, and their divorce was finalized in February 1954. She was 22 years old. Farouk's companion for the rest of his life was Irma Capese Minutolo, an 18-year-old opera singer from Naples whom he had met before the revolution. He never remarried. He never returned to Egypt. He never saw his palaces again. On the night of March 18, 1965, Farouk was dining at the Ile-de-France, a small restaurant near Vatican City in Rome. His companion that evening was a young blonde woman named Anna Maria Gatti. He ordered oysters, roast lamb, cake, and fruit. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, he lit a post-dinner cigar and then clutched his throat and fell forward onto the table. The sound of a 300-pound man hitting a restaurant table brought waiters running. He was rushed to San Camillo Hospital and placed in an oxygen tent. He was dead within minutes. On his body, officials found a loaded Beretta automatic pistol, dark glasses, a gold watch, and $2,615 in cash. The official cause of death was massive cardiac arrest. He was 45 years old. No autopsy was ever performed. Queen Farida, his first wife, requested that the body remain unexamined, citing religious reasons. Though Islamic law does not prohibit autopsy, the absence of medical evidence has sustained poisoning theories for 60 years, and they are not unreasonable. Ibrahim Baghdadi, an Egyptian intelligence official, had been moonlighting as a waiter at the Ile-de-France, the very restaurant where Farouk collapsed. Within 2 months, Baghdadi was appointed governor of Monfia province, a promotion widely interpreted as a reward. Years later, Salah Nasser, the head of Egyptian intelligence under Nasser, reportedly revealed during a court proceeding that Farouk had been killed with aconitine, a plant-derived poison that mimics cardiac arrest and is undetectable without specific toxicological testing, the kind of testing an autopsy would have provided. Fouad II, Farouk's son, has stated publicly that he believes his father was poisoned by enemies. Without an autopsy, the question cannot be resolved. It has not been resolved in the 61 years since. Nasser initially refused to return the body to Egypt. Shah King Faisal of Saudi Arabia offered burial in Saudi Arabia, an offer that embarrassed Nasser into relenting. But the burial itself was a calculated insult. Farouk's will specified the royal cemetery at Al-Rifa'i Mosque in Cairo. Nasser instead ordered him buried at the tomb of Ibrahim Pasha near Imam al-Shafi'i, a lesser site, a deliberate diminishment. It was not until Anwar Sadat's presidency that the body was finally moved to Al-Rifa'i Mosque, fulfilling the dead king's wishes. In a historical irony that belongs in a novel, Italy's exiled King Victor Emmanuel III had died in Alexandria, Egypt, in 1947. Two deposed kings, each dying in the other's country, each buried far from home. The revolution did not stop at Farouk. It reached into the walls of every palace, the drawers of every cabinet, and the vaults of every treasury the dynasty had accumulated across a century and a half. The Egyptian government hired Sotheby's to conduct what became known as the Palace Collections of Egypt auction, held at Koba Palace, itself a 75-acre compound behind 6-metre walls, in February and March of 1954. The coin sale alone comprised 2,798 lots spread across 9 days. It was the largest dispersal of royal possessions since the execution of Louis XVI. American dealer Abe Kossoff flew to Cairo to bid. Hans Schulman, who had been Farouk's personal coin dealer, arrived with $300,000 in credit, money owed to cover Farouk's unpaid debts. Collector John J. Pittman, a chemical engineer from Rochester, New York, mortgaged his house to fund his attendance. The cataloguing had been rushed. World-class rarities were lumped into group lots and sold for fractions of their value to bidders who understood what they were buying and bidders who did not. The most extraordinary object in the collection was a 1933 St. Gordon's double eagle, a gold coin that was never supposed to leave the United States Mint. President Roosevelt had ordered all 1933 double eagles melted down. Farouk, with the compulsive acquisitiveness that defined his collecting, had purchased one in the 1940s for $1,575. The US Treasury, through an administrative error, issued an export license. Listed as Lot 185 in the 1954 Sotheby's catalogue, the coin was withdrawn at Washington's request on the eve of the sale. Then it vanished. For 40 years, no one knew where it was. It resurfaced in 1996 when British coin dealer Stephen Fenton was arrested in a Secret Service sting operation at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. After years of legal proceedings, the coin sold at Sotheby's in 2002 for $7.59 million to shoe designer Stuart Weitzman. In June 2021, Weitzman resold it for $18.9 million, the highest price ever paid for a single coin at auction. A Fabergé egg from Farouk's collection, auctioned in 1954 for $19,400, was valued at $3.19 million by 1992. The revolution had confiscated the possessions. Time had revealed what they were actually worth. The palaces themselves became government property. Abdeen Palace, described by Life magazine as possibly the most magnificent royal palace in the world, with roughly 500 rooms spread across 24 feddans, now serves as both a presidential office and a public museum. Ras El Tin Palace, where Farouk signed his abdication, remains a presidential residence inside a naval base, its interiors closed to visitors. Montaza Palace, set amid more than 150 acres of Mediterranean gardens with 50,000 rose bushes, was split in half. The Salamlek wing converted to a luxury hotel, the grounds opened as a public park. Koba Palace, where the auction liquidated the family's possessions, hosts visiting foreign dignitaries. And Barack Obama was received there in 2009. The buildings stand. The family that built them does not live in any of them. The Egyptian government's accounting of Farouk's collection has never addressed what may have been its most strategically publicized element. After the revolution, officials announced the discovery of a vast collection of explicit material in the palaces, described as the largest private collection of its kind in the world. The claim was repeated by international media for decades. Harvard historian Roger Owen later examined some of the artwork and called it nothing terribly offensive. Farouk himself, from exile, insisted that items had been planted by the revolutionaries. Multiple historians now consider the lurid accounts at least partly Nasserist propaganda, designed to delegitimize the monarchy in the eyes of a conservative Egyptian public. The strategy worked. For a generation of Egyptians raised under Nasser, Farouk was not a king who had been overthrown. He was a degenerate who had deserved it. I want to know what you think about Sotheby's auction. The Egyptian government rushed the cataloguing, lumped world-class rarities into group lots, and sold 150 years of accumulated heritage to foreign dealers at fire sale prices. A single coin from that auction later sold for almost $19 million. Should Egypt have preserved that collection as national heritage, kept it intact in a museum as part of the country's own history? Or was the liquidation itself the point, the symbolic act of a republic dismantling every trace of the dynasty it replaced? Tell me in the comments. But the revolution's reach did not stop at property. It reached into the next generation. Farouk had 4 children, 3 daughters from his first marriage to Queen Farida, née Safina Zulfikar, married in 1938, divorced in 1948, and 1 son from his second marriage to Queen Nariman. The daughters grew up in Switzerland, educated at European schools, their Egyptian citizenship stripped by Nasser's government in 1958. They carried titles that had no legal standing in any country on earth, and a family name that, in Egypt, had become synonymous with corruption and excess. Princess Ferial, the eldest, was born on November 17, 1938. She attended a Swiss finishing school and in 1966 married Jean-Pierre Perretin, a Swiss man. And the marriage collapsed quickly, and Perretin died in 1968. Ferial had 1 daughter, Yasmin, and worked in the hotel business in Switzerland for the rest of her life. She was diagnosed with stomach cancer in 2002. She died on November 29, 2009 in Geneva at 71. The eldest daughter of the King of Egypt spent her working life managing hotel bookings. Princess Fawzia, the younger Fawzia, not to be confused with Farouk's famous sister who had married the Shah of Iran, was born on April 7, 1940. She never married. She became a pilot, a ship captain, and a scuba diver. A woman who seemed determined to master every vehicle that could carry her away from the life she had been given. She earned her living as a simultaneous interpreter in Switzerland, translating between languages for organizations that did not know or care that she was a princess. In 1995, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She died on January 27, 2005 in Lausanne at 64. Her body was flown to Cairo and buried at Al-Rifai Mosque. In death, she returned to Egypt. Princess Fadia, the youngest daughter, was born on December 15, 1943. In 1965, she married Prince Pierre Alexeyevich Orlov, a Swiss geologist of Russian noble descent, a union between 2 families that had lost everything to 2 different revolutions. They had 2 sons, Michel Shamil, born in 1966, and Alexander Ali, born in 1969. Fadia worked as a translator for the Swiss Ministry of Tourism. Maida, the daughter of the King of Egypt, translated Swiss tourism brochures. She died suddenly on December 28, 2002, in Lausanne at 59. Their brother, the infant king who had sailed with Farouk aboard the Mahroussa, would spend the next 4 decades as the most overlooked monarch in the world. King Fouad II was born on January 16, 1952, at Abdeen Palace in Cairo. He was 6 months old when the revolution came. He was technically proclaimed king when Farouk abdicated, and a regency body led by Prince Mohammed Abdel Moneim governed in his name, though actual power belonged entirely to the Revolutionary Command Council. On June 18, 1953, the monarchy was formally abolished. Egypt became a republic, the first in its history. And Fouad had been king for 337 days. He had spent all of them in a crib. He grew up in Cully, a village on Lake Geneva, with his 3 half-sisters, a nanny, a governess, and a bodyguard. He attended public school where he was bullied. He later enrolled at the Institut Le Rosey, one of the most expensive boarding schools in the world, and graduated from the University of Geneva in 1975 with a degree in politics and economics. "I have no recollection whatsoever of my reign," he has said, "but as a Muslim, I have to accept my fate." His Egyptian citizenship, stripped in 1958 under Nasser, was restored in 1974 under Sadat. He did not visit Egypt until 1991. He married Dominique France Loeb-Picard, a Jewish woman of Alsatian origin who converted to Sunni Islam and took the name Fadila. The civil ceremony took place in Paris on April 16, 1976. The religious wedding was held on October 5, 1977, in Monte Carlo, with Prince Rainier and Princess Grace of Monaco as witnesses. They had 3 children: Muhammad Ali, born on February 5, 1979 in Cairo; Princess Fawzia Latifa, born on February 12, 1982 in Monaco; and Prince Fakhruddin, born on August 25, 1987 in Rabat. The couple separated in the mid-1990s and divorced in 1996, with proceedings not finalising until 2008. Fouad suffered depression and was estranged from his children for years. In September 2014, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi granted Fouad a diplomatic passport with an unprecedented entry under profession: former King of Egypt. On April 2024, Fouad visited Montaza Palace in Alexandria with his son Muhammad Ali, the first royal family visit to that former summer residence in 72 years. The man who had been king for 337 days stood in the gardens of a palace he had left as an infant and would never own again. He is now 74. He lives near Lake Geneva and depends partly on financial support from Saudi Arabia. His eldest son had been born on Egyptian soil. It would take that son 41 years to prove it. The story of Muhammad Ali's birth is itself a diplomatic negotiation. In 1978, Fouad II's wife was pregnant with their first child, and Morocco's King Hassan II personally intervened with President Sadat to allow the birth to take place in Cairo, alone and in utmost discretion, as the arrangement specified. If you watch my video on Albania's forgotten royal family, you already know that the South African government declared a maternity ward Albanian territory for 24 hours, so that the heir to the Albanian throne could be born on home soil. Hassan's arrangement for the Egyptian birth was quieter. No declaration of sovereignty, no ceremony, just a private hospital and an agreement between 2 heads of state. On February 5, 1979, Muhammad Ali was born in Cairo. He was the first male member of the direct royal branch to touch Egyptian soil since 1953. Yet no proof of Egyptian nationality was issued at his birth. He would not discover this until decades later, when he tried to register his own children. Muhammad Ali attended the Institut Le Rosey in Switzerland, his father's alma mater, and built a career in real estate consulting in Paris. On August 30th, 2013, he married Princess Noel Zahir Shah of Afghanistan, the granddaughter of Afghanistan's last king, Zahir Shah, at Istanbul's Chiragan Palace. 2 grandchildren of 2 deposed kings, 2 lost monarchies joined by a single marriage. Their twins, Prince Fouad Zahir Hassan and Princess Farah Noor, were born on January 12, 2017. If you've stayed this far into the story of a family that lost 5 palaces, 75,000 acres and a throne, and you're curious about how stories like this end, subscribing takes a moment. And it means these histories keep getting made. Securing his Egyptian passport consumed years. He describes the bureaucratic ordeal with the precision of someone who has told the story many times. An Egyptian government clerk demanded that he prove his father was Egyptian. His father had been the king. Apparently, that was not enough. The passport was finally issued in 2020. In early 2025, Muhammad Ali permanently relocated to Cairo with his wife and their 2 children. The news broke through an AFP report on March 7th, 2025. He was photographed the day before at the historic Muhammad Ali Mosque in Cairo's citadel, a mosque named for the founder of his dynasty, the Albanian-born Ottoman commander who had seized Egypt in 1805 and whose descendants ruled for 150 years. He told reporters that for some Egyptians, his return represented a form of historical reconciliation between royalist and republican Egypt. He said his father had a shattered destiny, that Fouad was born a child king who lost his kingdom and his throne. For his father, he said, Egypt was a lost homeland. For himself, it is a regained homeland. He stated he had no political ambitions. He wanted only to preserve and pass down the historical, cultural, and artistic heritage of the Egyptian royal family. 150 years of history that deserves to be honoured. His wife, he said, supported me and even pushed me. She wanted to live in the East and for our children to grow up as close as possible to their roots. No official Egyptian government statement accompanied the return. No palaces were restored. No titles were reinstated, no legal mechanism exists under the Republican Constitution to restore the monarchy, and no organised monarchist movement seeks to create one. Muhammad Ali rents an apartment in Cairo. He runs his Paris consulting firm remotely. He is improving his Arabic. The Egyptian government's stance toward the dynasty has moved through 3 distinct phases. Nasser's active hostility, stripping citizenship, refusing burial, demonizing Farouk through propaganda, confiscating every asset, and almost certainly ordering the assassination of the exiled king himself. Sadat's cautious openness, restoring citizenship, allowing a royal birth on Egyptian soil, moving Farouk's body to its rightful tomb. And Sisi's pragmatic acknowledgement, granting diplomatic passports, permitting permanent residence, to recognizing that 150 years of dynastic history is also Egyptian history, regardless of how it ended. The young Egyptians who engage with their royal past through television dramas and social media have no memory of the revolution. The Republic is all they have ever known. The monarchy is not a political aspiration. It is a period drama. The Mahroussa sits in a harbour at Port Said. It has been restored and converted into a museum ship. It carried Khedive Ismail away from Egypt in 1879. It carried King Farooq away from Egypt in 1952. It carried an infant king who would grow into an old man near Lake Geneva, who depends on Saudi charity and holds a passport that lists his profession as former king. The yacht has not moved. The grandson lives in Cairo.